33% of 13-year-olds and 45% of 17-year-olds said that they only read nonfiction 1 to 2 times a year. And that's not good on its own. Take it with this, though. Out of the top 100 most competitive categories for books on Amazon, the top 21 are all fiction, and there are only 12 nonfiction in the list. So, if we take these two things together, we can see that reading nonfiction for fun is really not very common. Um, and this is consistent with the survey I took of our class. Most of us said we don't read nonfiction for fun. And I completely understand that. I was the same way. I didn't start reading nonfiction for fun until my senior year of high school. So I'm right there with you. I completely understand. But I think it's a problem. A 2006 report found that only 50% of students that took the ACT were ready for college level reading. And the biggest differentiator between students that were ready and students that weren't is being able to read complex texts, um, which couldn't be more relevant to college students. That's when people start having issues. And I think it's because we don't read nonfiction. When kids get to high school, they've pretty much only read fiction books. Throughout high school, they continue to only read fiction. Sometimes we get some difficult fiction, like Macbeth or Shakespeare in general, William Faulkner. We get some weird ones, but that's really different from a college chemistry textbook. Students aren't exposed to nonfiction. And so when we get to college and pretty much all we're reading is complex nonfiction, it can be really difficult. And it doesn't need to be. Because if we just push nonfiction from a young age, continue to read it through childhood, by the time we get to college, these textbooks won't be so foreign and so difficult. So if it's important and it's really helpful, then why aren't we already doing this? What's keeping people from reading nonfiction? First is that there's a stereotype that nonfiction is boring. And sometimes it definitely is. Not every nonfiction book is a good nonfiction book. And a lot of them aren't interesting. They're just really poorly written. They don't keep readers' attention. They're just boring. And the thing is, a lot of these books end up on our bookshelves, in our libraries, in our schools, in our hospitals. People don't usually read nonfiction. And so when we have people stocking these shelves that don't read it, they don't know what they're ordering. They don't know if this is a good nonfiction book or if I should just get this one instead that's actually really bad and has terrible reviews. You know, if librarians themselves aren't reading nonfiction, if teachers themselves aren't reading nonfiction, if parents aren't reading nonfiction, then they don't know what to recommend to kids. So it's really important for us to start reading nonfiction. Otherwise, we just kind of continue this cycle of libraries that don't have good nonfiction books in them, and also not exposing kids to nonfiction, not encouraging them to read it. The combination of those two things makes a generation that is completely distant from nonfiction. This has got to stop because it would make college so much easier for people if they are used to reading that type of material already. So, what can we do to motivate reading? Motivating kids to read is so easy, but the thing is, we don't really do it for nonfiction, and I don't know why, because it wouldn't be more difficult. Kids have book fairs, kids have reading lists, kids have sections of the library with special books, with special awards. None of those things are ever nonfiction, and they should be. We should be promoting nonfiction books at book fairs. We should be making nonfiction books the prizes they get sometimes. We should have nonfiction books on the shelves with the popular, good, super exciting reads. That's what needs to happen. Continuing through school and education, we need to assign nonfiction readings in English classes. We need to get middle schoolers and high schoolers reading nonfiction. And sometimes the only way to do that is to force them to. A lot of kids don't read unless it's assigned. So if they don't have a single nonfiction book assigned to them, they're not going to read any. That's really damaging. So we need to start assigning it. And it's not just kids that need to make this difference. Like I said, as people that are going to be teaching the next generation, be it as teachers, as family and friends, however, we have to be the ones to know what nonfiction books are good or not to be able to recommend them to them, because kids can easily get discouraged when the first nonfiction book they pick up is bad and maybe the second one also is. What's going to get them to pick up that third book? At the moment, really nothing. So we have to make sure that their first experiences with nonfiction are great ones. We do that with nonfiction. You don't just slap a really bad, like generally not liked book into a kid's hands as one of the first ones they read. No, think about the books we have kids read. We have Narnia, we have Harry Potter, we have the Hunger Games. We recommend kids books to kids that we love, and we got to do that with nonfiction too. That's the best way to encourage them to read. So, as a way of helping motivate everyone to start reading nonfiction, I have some books here to share with you guys. So this is Salem Possessed. This was the first book I read for class that I was talking about, and it's all about the Salem witch trials. This book taught me so much about how history works, and so much about the Salem witch trials. I feel like genuinely an expert on it now. If I read this book a few more times, um, I would be there. It's such a good book if you're interested in history, and most of the books I'm about to show you are, just because that's my personal interest. This is Wine and War. It's a book about French wine trade during World Wars. I thought it was super interesting. I also have Salt. This is a book all about salt. It's pretty big for that, but it's so interesting. And yeah, there are a lot of books like this that are called micro histories. And it's like the history of one thing, like sandwich trials, like salt, like cod. This is a book all about the history and importance of cod into the world. Um, I have three more. This is Under the Black Flag. It's a book about the history of pirates. I'm super into history, but there are other things too. So this one is The Devil in the White City, and it's all about H.H. Holmes, who is considered to be the world's first serial killer, and his hotel that he built specifically to murder people. So, and then by the same author, I have Thunderstruck, which is another book about a murder throughout in history. So, those are just some nonfiction books that I really like. As a recommendation to you guys, I encourage you to do your own research, find your own books, find your own niche, and give nonfiction a shot.